at Medicine, starring Dr. Kenneth Wright and Dalia Urman. Afternoon to everybody. Welcome to our show, Mad Medicine. Dr. Kenneth Wright is with us as usual, and good to have you here today. I'm Dalia Urman. We're at TLA radio station. And how are you today with this crazy weather? Did you get rain?
No rain, but I was indoors most of the time. So,
Okay.
Hey, Dalia, good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we have a lot to discuss because the news is going crazy this week with every day something different with, how do you call him, Fauci? Floppy Fauci. And
I call him flip-flop Fauci. I like yours better.
Right.
Floppy Fauci.
Floppy Fauci. And all the different, one day it's this and the next, one day they literally are telling us you don't need a booster. The next morning you might need a booster next week. What is going on, Dr. Kenneth Wright?
Isn't it crazy? And now they're saying that kids have to wear masks.
I heard, it's crazy. Today I heard that actually on the radio, that whether or not you're immunized, even the teachers, they all have to wear masks, but they don't have to social distance. How does this make sense to you?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Social distancing, it was shown very clearly, had nothing to do with stopping. There was a study, 6 feet versus 60 feet separation, and it made no difference.
Oh, wow.
And I know several families where like one person got it and the other person didn't, like husband got it and the wife didn't. It's weird. It's just like a cold. I mean, it's a virus. You have a cold in the family, right? And some people are sicker than a dog and other ones aren't. Oh, what's that about? Yes. It is so weird the way virus transmit. Then even flip-flop Fauci, or what you call him, floppy Fauci? I kind of like that one. But so floppy Fauci, even he, when his emails were discovered, and this was a year ago, he was saying, hey, guys, the masks don't work. He says, these masks, these surgical masks, these masks you get at the store, they don't work. Okay? And they don't work. And there was a study in Sweden, Dalia, I think I've talked about it before. 1.6 million kids, and none of them wore masks. They were school-age kids. I don't know exact age, but school-age kids. Nobody died. I think 2 people out of 1 million got it. At least they looked like they got it, and nobody died. So the kids don't need to wear masks. Okay, they don't need to wear, even if they're not vaccinated. And the stupid teachers are all afraid, right? They're vaccinated. And remember, they said Flip-Flop said that, oh, the variants, we're all going to die of the variants. And I'm going, guess what? The vaccine covers the variants. You know, you are exactly right. This guy is a hack.
Yes.
A political hack. And I'm sorry, it's not just Republican or Democrat. He's been the head of the NIH allergy and immunization for years under various administrations. He's political, but his position shouldn't be, but it is. And then when you look at what happened with the lab, he funded the darn lab where the virus came from. He wanted to be sneaky, so he funded it through a private 501c nonprofit. So hopefully they wouldn't see. But any idiot can say the money went to the foundation and then it went to Hunan Lab in China where they do that viral research. A stupid name, gain of function. They should have said making it more lethal. Right?
Exactly.
And why would he be so interested in funding that? He's allergy immunity. What's he doing in virology? Well, I bet you, and this is now I speculate, but that's not speculation, what I just said. But this is speculation. And you actually told me this. I think they're weaponizing the virus to make it a weapon. And then he's going to sell it.
A while back, yes.
Then Flip-Flop's going to sell it to the highest bidder. And you're talking billions of dollars. Now, that's speculation. You can call it conspiracy theory. But the first part is absolute dead-on fact. I've got the article from Hunan Lab thanking the NIH Allergy and Immunization Department, which Flip-Flop has been head of for who knows how long, longer than I've been a doctor, probably.
Yes. So I do have a question because you mentioned now, and we know that it's a virus. And I've had people write me in from our shows asking questions about this. If it's a virus, which we know it is, Does the immunization really work as an immunization, or it's like a flu shot where yearly we're going to have different variants of the flu shot given to us?
Well, that's what Fauci had said, that we're going to have this thing mutate. Now it's a different virus, and we're not immunized against that new, what they call them, variants. And it's really their mutations. But guess what? We've been immune. And I think the reason is that the new virus, it's not the same as influenza vaccine. I misspoke. The vaccine we got for COVID is not the same. This vaccine, they're not injecting us with dead virus and having us react to it. They're making us make the spike protein of the virus. The virus has this spike protein, which is a spike, and the cell is lets the virus enter the cell. So this spike protein, all the COVID viruses have this same protein. So we're immunized against that little protein, and it can't enter our body. It can enter our body. It can't get in the cell. And that goes for all the COVID, including SARS. I finally heard a doctor say, a researcher say, that it probably immunized you against SARS, because SARS is a COVID virus and it has a spike protein. So any of those viruses with a spike protein, we're okay with. So it's across the board. And that's why we are immunized against all of those variants. Now, could the spike protein mutate? Very difficult, because that's sort of like the common thread between all of them.
Okay. So yes, I also, in the beginning, I remember a few shows back, I mentioned to you that I heard that they used something to do with the SARS immunization for us now. And I don't remember, it was an article I read back then. And at that time when I read it, it said that the SARS vaccine, or whatever it was they were giving people, was good for 21 years. I don't know where they got that number from.
I am not that familiar with the SARS vaccine, because I'm not sure exactly what their strategy was and what type of vaccine that was. But in fact, I was pretty dumb, to tell you the honest truth, about the whole thing, because I thought they were injecting attenuated virus. In other words, a weak form of COVID. I thought they were injecting maybe dead COVID, and then you react against that. But I was wrong. They're injecting RNA, which is a small protein that makes proteins. And then our cells, we went through this before in a previous show.
Yes, we
slides
did.
And everything.
We did. We could.
Our cells are making the spike protein. Tell you, your cells are making the spike protein. It's ejected from the cell, and then your body sees it and responds to that spike protein.
So why would we need a booster?
Well, they're not sure, right?
Or not.
I just heard this, just like you did. We need the booster. Oh, no, we really don't need the booster. In fact, the booster in a young, healthy person might be bad. Okay. Remember with the myocarditis, pericarditis, happened in young males who were healthy and got the second booster with a second Moderna or second Pfizer.
Correct.
So the booster too soon might be bad, because you're already revved up, and now you're over revving your immune system. So here, the question is, and this was on the list that you had given me of questions, but if your immune system is over revved, you start attacking yourself, and that's autoimmune disease.
Okay.
So I think you have to be careful about over boosting, especially young, healthy people who have a very, very strong immune system anyway.
Or someone that's had COVID and now has been immunized twice.
That's probably overkill.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, we all, 90% of people who get the second COVID vaccine in Moderna or Pfizer, they feel bad. I did. I mean, I still went to work, but you feel like you got the flu. You know why? Because you've got the antibodies already, and they're giving you another dose of the spike protein. You just go crazy and attack it.
Maybe it was too soon. I mean, we all did it already.
Right.
Maybe the distance of the days was too soon to get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a year from now, they might know.
Right. And maybe you want to wait 10 years like you do with tetanus. I think tetanus is 10 years.
Every 10 years, correct.
Yeah, I used to work in the emergency room, and we'd always ask, when was your last tetanus shot? And it's 10 years. Holy cow.
Yes.
We did it 3 weeks. I think they really did that to cover their rear ends. Let me make it clear. They were covering their butts.
Yes.
They wanted to make sure that you were immunized because, God forbid, if you had one case of somebody dying of COVID after being immunized, so they gave you the double dose, which you get, it's still controversial. You get around 70 to 80% of your antibodies on the first one.
Yes, I actually know that because I had a test and I was practically fully okay.
Yeah, after one.
Yes.
But you remember now, everybody, people, Dalia is superhuman, so we can't really, use her as a guide.
I'm not an example.
She's like super lady. So no, I was joking, but you are super lady. But really, you get a lot of your antibodies just on that first one. So then they just wanted to make sure that you really got your antibodies. And I did not feel well after the second shot.
You and many others. I actually felt well, which is surprising. Here you go. I'm Superwoman. Anyways, one of the questions that I had for you from somebody that I had a discussion with the other day was, for instance, when you got your polio vaccine, and I know that there was a series, I think it was 3 of them. I'm not really sure. But then it's for life. And They were saying, if this is not for life, what's the point of doing it? They were trying to have an argument or discussion type thing about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, COVID in older people can be devastating and lethal. Also, there's a sequelae, meaning there's other issues that you get after you, quote, recover. You don't recover fully. So memory loss, the guest we had on, remember, Dalia, last week, has a memory loss issue. He had COVID.
Yes. He brought notes with him.
Right. So there are other issues. You don't want to get COVID. If you have to get boosted in 10 years or 4 years or whatever, it's okay. It's not the end of the world.
I'm just telling you the questions and the things out there that people are trying to argue with.
Right.
And make a legitimate argument out of it, because this is what they believe and this is what they're thinking. And I
be blunt? They need to wake up. They need to find reality. The reality is vaccines work. Now, if you over-vaccinate somebody, there are complications. So you have to be reasonable. And I think having the 2 Pfizer or 2 Moderna is reasonable. And the data is showing that. So the recent, this week, I think it was, Dalia, late last week, Guillain-Barré syndrome had been reported with Johnson & Johnson. Are you familiar? I don't know if the groups heard that.
No, I think we spoke about it on a brief note last week. We might have.
So it's a neurological issue where you have paralysis. And if it's really severe, you can't breathe. In other words, your breathing muscles, they're paralyzed. And it is a well-known autoimmune disease where your own body, antibodies, attacks the nerves. We've seen it after influenza vaccines. Virtually all the vaccines have had it. The incidence in large populations of just getting it for no reason, sometimes you get it after a viral infection. So you get the bad cold and you can get it. But in general, over large populations without COVID, it's about 1 in a million. I just looked this up. It's 1 in a million.
Okay. All right.
With Johnson & Johnson vaccine, it's 4 to 6 out of a million. It's 4 to 6 times.
A higher number, yes.
Yeah. And so the FDA looked at that and said, wait a minute. If it was in 1 out of a million, that's normal, right? But it's 4 to 5, something like that, high. So they're red flagging it. I don't think they're pulling it yet, but they're going to watch it closely. It's still very, very rare, right? Out of a million vaccines, you get 4 to 5 cases.
Correct.
All right.
Which is still high, though, because if you're there, people, for you, it's 100% that you have.
If you've got it. There's the other thing is that if you're young and your chances are almost 0 of dying or having a significant sequelae with, let's say you're under 18, you got to look at that risk of getting COVID, which in a young person is almost 0 versus 5 out of a million, Plus, in females, young females under 50, and this was, by the way, young males under 50 with Guillain-Barré, but in young females, they got that clotting. Remember the clotting,
Yes.
thrombocytosis.
Yes.
Yes. And so when you take and I looked at that was about 1 to 2 out of a million. And then you add 4 or 5 out of a million, let's say. So now it starts to creep up a little bit. And so if you were young, you might say, look, I'll take my chances with COVID.
Right. Unless you want to travel or do other things with your family and you have to start quarantining.
And then you're going to take that risk. And you know what? You can't take all risk out of life.
Correct. All life is a risk. Just getting in your car is a risk.
Absolutely. You know, I'm operating tomorrow, so I'm telling the patients, well, I've never lost anybody under anesthesia, but the insurance companies
don't open your mouth.
Well, the insurance companies make me, say all the possible. You could lose your eye, blah blah blah.
Correct. Yes,
but
we all signed those papers away.
Right. So that's the kind of risk we're talking about with this COVID. It's 1 out of a million, 4 out of a million with the vaccine.
Right.
But let's flip it around. If you get the vaccine and you're, let's say, an older person over 50, my God, your risk for getting it or giving it are zero. You don't have to wear a mask. Those teachers don't need to wear a mask. You can't get it and you can't give it. And I'm watching some guy, yo-yo brain, riding his bike with a mask on.
I've seen this all the time. Yes, I've seen it, or in their car with the windows shut and rolled up and with the mask on still till today. But I do have a question, because now more and more people are wearing masks. I've gone into stores and you don't have to wear them anymore, and they are wearing them. But they are saying that the death rates in the hospitals are rising right now. I heard this on the news this week. I think it was in Alabama. The hospitals are almost at full capacity at this point.
And here in Los Angeles County, I would have 3,000 new cases over the weekend, something like that.
Yes.
But guess what?
Deadly cases or just general cases?
Some of them, they're very sick. But guess what? Every one of those cases, as you sent me a link, were non-vaccinated patients.
Okay, please say that again.
Yes, you're right. Dalia, you are absolutely correct. And I love you for saying that. The news says COVID is up. What they really should say is there's been no new cases, no new deaths, no new hospitalizations if you're vaccinated. The only ones that are getting this are you unvaccinated people. So we're not going to give you a lottery ticket or a free ride to Disneyland. We're going to tell you the truth.
Correct.
They're enticing these like we're morons. You go to Disneyland and how about this? You won't die. You won't have to go to the hospital if you get the vaccine, which doesn't even hurt. But I didn't even feel the darn needle going in me.
It was so fast, but that's not even the point. Even if it would hurt, you should get it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't even hurt. I mean, I'm a big wimp, but it didn't even hurt. No.
Yes.
Get the vaccine. I'm glad you brought that up. Again, the only cases that went to the hospital were cases that were not vaccinated.
Right. I sent you that article. That was a legit article.
Right.
I posted it on social media as well. But I keep getting like conspiracy theories from people that are anti-vax. So they keep sending me back bunches of terrible conspiracies.
By the way, let's talk about that, because I've also got good friends that are doctors and that are against vaccinating. But I've looked at their stuff and I question about it. It's 4 cases out of, 1 million or 10 million. It's ridiculous. It's so, the complication rate is so low. It's so safe.
Okay. So when you said that, that's not just from COVID vaccinations. You could actually have a death or something happen from any vaccine.
Absolutely.
You don't know how anybody's going to, you can die from a Tylenol. I mean, that's taking it out of proportion.
Right. Absolutely. There's idiosyncratic reactions to almost any medication. And with the vaccines, it's the same that we've known about Guillain-Barré with influenza and other vaccines for years. Polio, even polio vaccines. So, yeah, I mean, nothing's without some risk, but the risk is so
very
small,
mild and small.
Very mild. And so you got to weigh risk versus benefit. Where I'm not sure is what we do with the kids. I don't think anybody's sure.
Right. Nobody is sure about that. I
Right.
guess if a child has underlying, some kids do have underlying issues, even as a child. I mean, my guess would be if I was a parent, maybe I would want them vaccinated. I don't know. It's such a hard decision. Each person, I think it's very individual, and the age and what are they doing? Are they going overseas? Are they staying home for the summer? Are they in camp? I think it
Right.
has to do with a bunch of stuff like that. I have another important question for you about that, which is right now when they're testing people, how do they know if they have the regular COVID or the new Delta kind? Or I guess there's one more variant. I'm not really sure the name of
Right.
it.
Yeah, there are several variants that people talk about. British
Okay.
variant, Delta variant. So here's a Brazilian variant. I looked this up just today.
Okay.
So I would try to figure out what's going on. And it was unbelievably hard to figure it out because I don't know why. It's not that hard a question. But
Right.
what I got from this is that the PCR, and that's a test where it takes a little bit of the virus RNA and it amplifies it.
Okay.
And so it just takes a small amount of virus and you're positive. That test, which is a rapid test, which is the rapid PCR test, just identifies COVID.
Just regular COVID, any kind of COVID.
Yeah, you don't know if it's a variant or not.
Okay. So how do they know the numbers?
Now they do have other tests, which are more sophisticated molecular biology tests, which actually look at the gene sequence and they know which variant it is. In order to know the variant, you got to look at exactly the gene sequence. It's just not so easy. But the screening,
why would someone ask to have that test or not ask?
I don't know how they know how
Okay.
many are variants.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what they do is once you're COVID positive, then maybe they take that sample and then they run it through the molecular tests. And that's probably what they do.
Because how are they counting
That's
these
what we do.
numbers?
That's what we do
Right.
with screening tests. We'll do a screening test, and then if it's positive, we'll run like a we'll run more tests on it.
Yes, I understand.
So we'll do a culture and sensitivity. We'll actually see what antibiotics a bacteria is, so we can know more about it. But the screening test itself just says you have COVID.
Okay, because that's what I was asked. What did regular COVID just disappear and there's a new variant? How are they knowing? People, this is part of the reasons that people are saying, quote unquote, that they're not being vaccinated because no one really knows anything. And are we covered, not covered? This is what I'm hearing.
You're right. And I hear it too. And I say, look, please, I don't mean to be insulting, but you're an idiot.
Thank you. Say it again.
Because you're hurting yourself.
Right. And the community.
And the community. You're making yourself crazy.
Mutating, right?
We do know a lot. We know a lot. We know that if you get the vaccine, you are safe against the variants.
Okay.
And I heard Fauci argue with Rand Paul. Floppy. Okay. With Rand Paul, he's saying, no, the vaccines are not effective against the variants. And I looked up the article he quoted, and it is. It wasn't as the antibodies are not as active against the COVID-19, but it still was against the variants. Okay. And we've talked about this. The Israeli study shows that. And now they're even saying it now, and even the mainstream is finally saying it. Why are they so hesitant in telling us the truth? I don't know. Now, the young kids, we've said it 1,000 times.
Politics.
It's all politics. The young kids, we're not sure. So you know what they should say is, folks, we're not sure if the vaccine is better for the young kids under 18, or maybe just leave them alone because their risk of getting bad COVID is so small.
Right.
That would just tell us that.
Right.
Then as a parent, you can make that decision, but don't give the smoke and mirrors.
However, I heard that in Israel, because most of the adults are vaccinated, now the younger generation is the one contracting COVID or the variant or the variant.
Sure.
And that they're worried about the schools a little bit because that was what was happening. But when they said younger, I'm not sure what age group they're talking about.
Well, I said that Swedish article, very nice article, 1.6 million. None of the kids got bad disease. And even it was, but I'm telling you, I don't know. I mean, that needs to be studied.
Yes.
We need to look at unvaccinated kid populations and see what happened to them. And then when do you vaccinate?
There's a lot to learn.
That we don't know. But if you're I would say over 40 and you haven't been vaccinated, you're at risk for getting bad COVID. Small risk, but there's a significant risk.
Yes.
If you get vaccinated, that risk is almost zero. And the chances you're going to have a bad outcome with the vaccine is 1 in a million.
Correct. What are you going to tell the people that are saying that, oh, COVID is just like a flu, no big deal. Even if we got it, it wouldn't be anything. It's not even a big deal. We're not worried. I've heard this. People tell me this.
I've heard that too. In fact, a very good friend of mine who's a PharmD, she absolutely says that. Yes. And I have had colleagues who were otherwise healthy, not real elderly, maybe 50-year-olds, athletes, they work out, they're in good shape, they're not diabetic, almost died on a respirator at Cedars.
I know people like that, and I actually know people that unfortunately did die. But the argument with these people out there that are saying, oh, no big deal, it's like a flu. Where'd the flu go? The flu disappeared. All the other diseases disappeared. No, not true. Nothing disappeared.
I finally figured out why influenza disappeared.
Okay, but it didn't really disappear.
Can I tell you why?
That had the flu. Yes.
Can I tell you why? One of my patients I was talking, who's a physician, was talking. They stopped testing for it.
Oh, okay.
Why do you think all of a sudden we had all these COVID positives? Because the first set of tests were from the CDC, weren't even good. But they finally got good tests, and guess what happened? You tested more people. You're going to get more results.
Well, of course, but
they stopped testing for the influenza. They're all testing now for COVID.
Okay, so
another issue though is that, let's say you test somebody for COVID and it comes out positive. You're not going to test them for influenza because you've got the diagnosis, right?
Well, they already have COVID.
Right. You test them you have a flu symptoms. You test them, they're positive for COVID. Are you now, as a physician, you're not going to test them for anything else. You got the diagnosis. So they stopped testing. Right. But here's the problem with the CPR, rapid test, is that it is so sensitive that if you test asymptomatic patients without symptoms, just normal people, a lot of them will be positive because they got a little piece of the virus. And it's not even that they're infected, because that virus is around.
Okay.
And also it's any COVID. So if you go read, you can look at the literature on this. The false positive rate, meaning you test positive but you got nothing, is super high. It overdiagnoses COVID tremendously. And I tried to figure out how much does it, and I couldn't find a number. But they all say that the PCR, the rapid PCR test, overdiagnoses COVID. And so now the recommendation is, that's why the recommendation is, if you don't have symptoms, don't get tested, because you may test positive.
Yes. Okay, but now you're playing into the conspiracies where, oh, everybody has COVID, even if they don't have COVID. A heart patient has COVID, this has COVID.
That's true. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that.
Part of it is true. Okay.
And by the way, they never say caused by COVID death. What do they say? COVID related. Listen to their words. Look on the CDC. They never said the death was caused by COVID. They say COVID related. So you get a guy in a motorcycle accident, and before he dies, they put a swab up his nose, the poor guy, and it's positive for COVID. So they put it in there, and then they get about, I don't know, $18,000 in the hospital if it's a COVID death.
Correct, but are they still doing that? I know they did that in the very beginning.
I bet they are.
They did it in a bad way. I think that they were actually looking for COVID. They were scared that people are around. Today, I think people are a little bit more comfortable with the whole COVID issue.
I think
in the very beginning, even the nurses were scared to be around a patient that might have it.
I think it's corrupt, though.
Okay.
My handyman, I know him very well. He had diabetes and a heart condition. He went in the hospital. I talked to the family. He did not have COVID.
Okay.
He died of this heart attack. But guess what? It was COVID related. They told the family it was COVID related.
It's kind of confusing because on one hand, that plays into the conspiracy theories and the non-vax people, what they're
Right.
claiming. But on the other hand, people are still dying from really COVID.
Right.
And I always keep saying that to people that are like, oh, they had an underlying disease and they were over 50. Over 50 is very young. I'm over 50.
Right.
I don't feel old, you know. And even young people have sometimes underlying things. But that same person with diabetes can live till till they're 90 with diabetes. Just because they contracted COVID, they shouldn't have to die from COVID, meaning just because you have an underlying disease is not the excuse that people are giving. They're constantly giving this excuse that, oh, they had underlying disease. No, they could have lived with it.
Well, I think that
from COVID.
I just heard and you're right, it's anecdotal, but it's
right.
stories. But I've heard too many cases where they went in without COVID and they had other issues, even trauma, and they labeled them COVID related. And I know hospitals, you know, they're always underfunded and there's a ton of money. So let's just, you know, put the swab up, see what we get. And it's go look that, Dalia, it overdiagnoses COVID dramatically.
Okay. All right.
That doesn't mean that we shouldn't, that it's all fake. It's not fake.
Correct.
COVID is real. Okay. People are dying. People are getting problems, sequelae after getting it, like memory loss and weakness, tiredness, muscle aches. Exactly.
Lots of things, breathing issues,
and even Guillain-Barré syndrome, and even the myocarditis and pericarditis directly from COVID. So I don't want to downplay that, but I just think that it was exaggerated. And the problem with that is then the conspiracy people say, look, it's not. There is obviously, in any situation where there's a lot of government money, there's area for corruption.
Right.
But the truth is, COVID is a nasty disease. And in my opinion of a lot of good doctors, that you should get vaccinated so you don't have to worry. And I tell you what, you and I talked about this. It's like free at last. Lord have mercy, I'm free at last. I don't need to wear the mask. I don't care about getting it or giving it. I'm not going to give it to anybody. It's a great feeling.
Correct. I felt very safe. I went on a flight. I walk into stores without masks on. I'm not worried these days. I'm really not. I feel very comfortable that I was vaccinated, and I'm going to tell the audience, please get vaccinated. It's just so important for society, if not for you, for the elderly, for whatever you want to call it. And I think, Dr. Wright, you can wrap it up with a last statement, and we're going to call it a day.
Yeah, you know, everybody, the good news is the vaccine works. I like Moderna and Pfizer because it's an RNA, not a DNA. I'm sorry. I like Pfizer, Moderna. I don't like the Johnson & Johnson. I'm sorry. And I think I've been borne out. You know, I've been saying that. And it's a single shot, but it's DNA with an adenovirus vector. So I would stay with Moderna and Pfizer, consult your own doctor, get the vaccine, and then you don't need to wear a mask.
Correct. So, the mask is ridiculous at this point.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Dalia, we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Guess what? We want to come out to you, to your office one day. We're going to work on that and do our show live from your office.
Oh, that's fun. I have fun. I joke with the patients and they joke with me. It's fun.
Okay. We're going to do that in the near future.
All right.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye to the audience. Thank you for being with us. Have a good afternoon.